Hey, it's Adam. Over the past few months, I've spoken with more than I'd say 50 or 60 interior designers and decorators across Australia, the United States, Canada, and a few in the UK. Now, some were just starting out, and others had been in business for a number of years. Some were decorators and others were interior designers. Some worked from home, others had studios and small teams, although most of these people were solopreneurs. I really wanted to speak with solopreneurs. And going into these conversations, I expected to hear many of the usual challenges. You know the tune. I need more clients. I need more marketing visibility. I need more visibility in general. We need to charge more money. And while those topics certainly came up, what emerged from these conversations was far more interesting. There was a series of patterns that appeared again and again. And some were really surprising, and others were really quite confronting. And several were incredibly illuminating, even for designers who'd been in business for years. Now, the reason I started having these conversations in the first place was quite simple. I was developing my program, which is now called the Turnkey Design Success system, and I wanted to understand what designers genuinely loved about the profession, as well as what was frustrating them. What created those great projects as opposed to what caused the projects that became unnecessarily difficult. And what separates the designers who seem to enjoy their businesses from those who feel, trapped by their business? I wasn't looking for a perfect formula for anybody. That's not what this was about. To be very transparent with you, throughout those conversations, I was looking for the patterns that caused designers to feel something really had to change. And today, I thought it would be helpful to share 5 of the biggest revelations that emerged from those conversations. So, revelation number 1, the hybrid design phenomenon. Now, the first thing I noticed was what I've started to call the hybrid design phenomenon. Many designers were unintentionally blending DIY and full service into the same project. This is how this worked. The client purchased some items. The designer purchased others. The client managed some trades. The designer managed some trades. The client coordinated some deliveries. The designer coordinated others. The client made some decisions and, the designer made the rest. And before long, nobody was entirely sure who was responsible for what. Now, let me be clear. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a design package where you hand it off and let the client do with it what they will. There's a market for that. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with a full service turnkey project. And believe me, there's a market for that as well. Both can be fantastic businesses. The problem starts when they become blended together. The project enters a grey area. Expectations become fuzzy. The client becomes confused. The designer becomes frustrated. And eventually, the project becomes harder than it ever needed to be. Now, one designer described herself as offering full service. But when we unpacked the project, the designer was ordering furniture, but the client was coordinating trades and making independent purchasing decisions throughout this whole process. So by the end of the conversation, I wasn't entirely sure who was running the project. And interestingly, neither was she. So the biggest takeaway from that one, your clients don't need a designer who does a little bit of everything. They need a designer who's clear about the service they're providing and confident enough to lead it. Now, before we continue, one of the reasons these conversations were so fascinating is that they highlighted how difficult it can be to know whether your business is actually performing as well as you think it is. Many designers were busy, and of course, many were really talented. Many were working incredibly hard, but they didn't always have a clear way to measure whether the business itself was healthy in terms of the income. So that's one of the reasons I created the Solo Designer Profit Guide. So inside the guide, I share some of the common pricing approaches that came up during these conversations. And I not only pull back the curtain on what designers are charging in 2026, I'll show you the system I use to create profitable projects without relying on hourly billing. A system that allows you to charge For the value you create, take control of the outcome and deliver an experience your clients will rave about long after the project's finished. Because the goal isn't simply to make more money. I know that. It's to build a business where you're properly rewarded for the expertise, leadership, and responsibility you bring to every project. Now, if you'd like a copy, you can download it for free at turnkeydesign.com/profit guide, or simply scan the QR code on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. Now let's get back to some of these revelations that I got from those interviews. Revelation number 2, allowing the client to be the expert. The first revelation was about the hybrid design phenomenon, designers blending DIY and full service together. But this next revelation goes one step deeper. I noticed many designers weren't just blending the services, they were proactively asking clients to make decisions they weren't qualified to make. Questions like, would you like me to manage the furniture deliveries or would you prefer to do that yourself? Would you like me to coordinate the trades or would you like to organise them yourself? Would you like me to manage the installation or would you like to save some money and handle that part yourself? Now, on the surface, this sounds accommodating, helpful even. But here's the problem. The client isn't the expert on the process. You are. That's why they've hired you. Take a simple decorating project involving, say, painting and electrical work. Now, a designer knows when the electrician needs to turn up, when they need to attend. They know when patching might be required from the painter, and they know when that painter should return. They understand how the various pieces of the project should fit together. Now, the client usually doesn't know that, yet I kept hearing stories where designers handed these responsibilities to the client in an attempt to save them money. And the result? Trades weren't coordinated properly. Delays occurred. Things had to be redone. And when the project became frustrating, the disappointment and blame almost always landed back on the designer. The same thing happened with deliveries. Many designers offer clients the option of receiving furniture themselves. Again, I know it sounds helpful, except the client then becomes responsible for damaged goods, missing parts, packaging, assembly issues, and dozens of small problems they never wanted in the first place. What fascinated me was that this wasn't really about, deliveries or painters. It was often about confidence. Many designers were reluctant to charge properly for what we call implementation. So instead of saying, this is how I deliver the project, they asked, how would you like to do it? And the moment that happens, the client's effectively being asked to become the expert. And that's really a position they want to be in. Clients hire designers because they want guidance, they want leadership, and they want expertise. One of the strongest lessons from these interviews was that the best client experiences occurred when the designer confidently led the process rather than asking the client to design it themselves. Revelation number 3. The designers making the most progress had chosen a lane. Now, 2 designers immediately come to mind when I think about this one. The first is Laurie Murray from March Twice Interiors. She's a fabulous Australian designer. What struck me about Laurie was how clear she was about the outcome she wanted for her clients. She didn't want to hand over a design and hope for the best. She wanted a full-service turnkey experience. Here. While the renovations are completed, the furniture's received and stored, the installation's coordinated, the styling's finished, the photography's completed, and the clients walk back into a beautifully finished home. That's the experience she wanted to be known for, a premium experience, the kind that generates incredible photographs, enthusiastic referrals, and clients who rave about the result. Now, like every designer, Laurie faced challenges, refining and improving that process over time, but she never lost sight of the destination. She knew what she wanted the client experience to look like, and because of that, every decision became easier and the outcome no less than incredible. You should check out Laurie's website. The second designer is Eileen Jemmett from InStyle Colour. on the Sunshine Coast here in Australia. Eileen created a signature service that I absolutely love. She travels to clients' homes, helping them select paint colours, fixtures and finishes, making what can often feel like an overwhelming process much simpler and much more enjoyable. Now, she does it all from her van, affectionately named Riva. What impressed me wasn't just the name of her fabulous van, it was the clarity. So the client receives a defined amount of Eileen's time. Payments made up front, and selections are documented. So a report's provided and the client receives clear recommendations on what to buy and where to source it. Everyone understands exactly what's included. Everyone understands exactly what will be achieved. And perhaps not surprisingly, the service became incredibly popular in her area because clients weren't buying hours, they were buying certainty, clarity, and confidence in their decisions. They had a clear outcome. Now, since joining the Turnkey Design Success system, Eileen's also now developing a full service turnkey offering alongside with that Riva service. And here's what I find so interesting. She's not trying to blend the two together. She's defining them. And clients understand the difference. They understand the outcome and they understand what happens next. That clarity creates real confidence, not just for the client, but for the designer as well. That was something I noticed repeatedly. The designers making the most progress all seemed to share one thing in common. They knew exactly what they wanted to be known for and made decisions that supported that vision. They simply knew what they were offering and they weren't afraid to stand behind it. Revelation number 4, good projects never reach the finish line. Now, this one surprised me. Many of the projects I heard about weren't necessarily disasters. The clients weren't furious. The designers weren't being sued. The projects were fine. And that's exactly the problem. A beautiful project deserves more than a fine ending. What I kept hearing were stories of projects that slowly lost momentum. No installation day, no reveal. A lot of the time, no professional photography happened. So no publication opportunity if that's important to you. No memorable finish line. The client had lived through so much of the process that by the end the excitement had largely disappeared. And what should have been a standout experience became just another, in the end, completed project. And that felt like a shame because many of these designers were producing fantastic work. The homes really deserved to be photographed. The clients, though, really deserved a reveal. The designers deserved referrals, testimonials, and a portfolio they were proud of. Instead, the project simply just faded away. One of the biggest lessons I took from these conversations was that creating a great design is only part of the job. Finishing well matters as well. Revelation number 5. Some designers were thinking about walking away. Now, this was the most confronting revelation of all. When I started these interviews, I expected conversations around pricing, marketing, finding clients. What I didn't expect was a number of talented designers who seemed genuinely exhausted. And I don't mean just tired after a busy week, not frustrated after, some difficult situations on a project, just exhausted. A depletion of enthusiasm. Really a depletion of confidence, a depletion of belief that the business they'd worked so hard to build was actually worth continuing. And several designers openly discussed whether they wanted to keep doing this in the next 2 or 3 years. One designer became visibly emotional during our conversation. And honestly, I found that quite confronting because she was a really good designer. And in many cases, these designers had stunning work and could make a real difference to people's lives. They could make clients happy. They had years of experience. The creativity was still there, but what had disappeared was their enjoyment of the process. Over time, they'd become trapped in businesses that no longer supported the very thing that drew them into design in the first place. Creating wonderful homes and solving problems for people, improving people's homes exponentially. Instead, they were spending their days chasing deliveries and negotiating boundaries, dealing with confusion and constantly compromising their process, fees, etc. And after enough years of doing that, something started to happen. The work itself stopped feeling rewarding. And that was the part I found most unsettling, because for many designers, this isn't just about running a business. It's one of the few opportunities they have to leave a unique mark in the world. Every finished project reflects their ideas, their creativity, and most importantly, their ability to solve problems that most homeowners don't even know how to articulate. And that distinction matters, because throughout these conversations, I noticed something else. The designers who seemed energized, well, they weren't necessarily earning the most money. They weren't necessarily the most experienced. They'd simply built businesses that allowed them to spend more time doing the work they loved and less time doing the stuff that was draining them. Now, for me, that was the biggest revelation of all. Not that the designers needed better marketing, not that they needed more followers, definitely not that, but that many of them needed to reclaim the joy that brought them into this profession in the first place. So after more than 50 conversations, what was the most surprising thing? It wasn't that they all wanted to know about pricing or the latest in AI or how to grow their Instagram followers or how to do better with SEO or marketing. It certainly wasn't their lack of talent. The designers I spoke with, I would say, were incredibly talented. What surprised me was that the designers who seemed happiest, most confident and most fulfilled weren't necessarily the most experienced or the most successful on paper. They'd simply become intentional. Intentional about the services they offered, intentional about the clients they worked with and the process, intentional about the experience they wanted to create. They stopped trying to be everything to everybody. They'd stopped asking clients how a project should be delivered. And they'd started saying, this is how I work. This is what I believe creates the best outcome for you and for me. And this is the experience I want my clients to have. The result wasn't just better projects. It was more confidence, more enjoyment. Absolutely. Better client experiences, better photographs, and businesses that genuinely reflected who they were. Perhaps that's the biggest lesson from all of these conversations. The goal isn't to build somebody else's business. The goal is to build one that reflects your values, your strengths, and the way you want to work. Because when you get that right, everybody wins. So if you found this helpful, leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube. Let me know which of these 5 revelations resonated most with you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Now, if you're listening on the podcast, let me know as well. Send me an email at askadam@turnkeydesign.success.com. Or I'd love you to leave a review if you love the show. And remember, no matter where you're at in your business right now, you are on the right track. You're not behind, my friend, you're building. Keep backing yourself. And on that note, I'll see you in the next one.